want to be upfront about who I am. Before I tell you any of this, I am a 43-year-old woman from a suburb west of Columbus, Ohio. I hold a master's degree in clinical psychology. I spent 11 years working inside a psychiatric care facility before I moved into private practice. My entire professional career has been built around one specific skill, which is the systematic evaluation of perception. I've been trained to identify when a person's reported experience is distorted by stress, fatigue, medication, or underlying psychiatric condition. I have sat across from patients who described experiences far more dramatic than mine, and I have always, without exception, applied measured skepticism before accepting any conclusion. I say all of this because when I tell you that I tested every rational and clinical explanation available to me for what happened in my house on that Tuesday evening and found that not one of them held, I need you to understand the weight of that statement. I am not someone who reaches for the unexplained easily. I reached for it only after everything else collapsed. Hamid and I have been married for 16 years. We bought our house 9 years ago. It is a standard 2-story colonial on a quiet residential street in a suburb about 20 minutes west of Columbus on I-70. Good neighborhood. HOA, the kind of street where people wave from driveways. I know every sound that house makes, the particular groan of the third stair, the furnace click before it kicks on in winter, the exact sound of my husband's truck pulling into the garage, the squeak of the driver's door hinge, the rhythm of his footsteps, left foot heavier than right, the clatter of his keys on the counter, all of it part of the texture of home. It was a Tuesday in February. We had a broken weather strip on the door between the garage and the mudroom. Cold air had been pushing through the gap for about a week. That morning, my husband said he would run out to the Home Depot on Hilliard Rome Road after his afternoon calls. I heard him leave around 3:30, garage door up, truck backing down, garage door down. At 5:30, I heard the garage door again, the truck pulling in, the door opening, his footsteps, left foot heavier than right, across the mudroom tile, into the entryway, toward the cord, the ketic, the quist. Every sound at the right volume. I said, "Hey." I asked him if the weather strip fix looked manageable. He said it looked manageable. He said he could probably handle it over the weekend. The words were right. The voice was right. But when I turned, he was standing at the island, coat still on, keys clenched in his fist. He had not set them down. Hop traffic had been on Hilliard Rome. He said, "Fine." But traffic there is never fine. Not on a Tuesday afternoon. He said it fine. Not in his words. My phone buzzed. A text from his number. They were out of the size he needed. He was going to try Stringtown Road. He would be home by 6. I looked at the counter. I looked at the thing standing there. Keys still in its fist. Face frozen. Expressionless. Watching. Huff. I walked upstairs, locked the bedroom door, called his cell. He picked up. Store announcements in the background. His voice, real, alive, normal. I told him to call 911. The house was silent until the garage door opened and closed again. No car left the driveway. No figure walked away. The officers found nothing. Every door locked. No forced entry. But on the quartz countertop where it had stood was a circular compression, dark gray, the size of a closed fist. Quartz does not compress under hand pressure, yet it was bowed inward permanently. The mark is still there. I see it every morning when I make coffee. I have stopped trying to explain it. I have accepted that the explanation is not one I am clinically equipped to give. I want to establish some context before I get into what happened. I was a junior at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Forestry major, environmental science minor. I spent both of my previous college summers doing vegetation surveys and wildlife monitoring in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Solo fieldwork, often overnight, often in areas with no cell signal and no other personnel within reasonable distance. I'd been alone in the dark and genuinely remote backcountry more times than I can count, and I have never once had a panic response that was not warranted by actual circumstances. I also want to be specific about my condition that night. I was not drinking. I had not had anything other than coffee and water since the previous afternoon. I had slept close to 8 hours the night before and 7 the night before that. My head was clear, and my recall of every detail I am about to give you was sharp. My roommate and I had been paired together freshman year at Hess Hall and had chosen to keep living together through junior year. We were not the kind of close friends who spent every hour together. We were compatible in the way that matters most in a shared room. Same general sleep schedule, same threshold for noise and mess, same low-maintenance approach to cohabitation. 3 years of sharing roughly 300 square feet meant I knew his habits, the way you know the floor plan of a building you work in every day, not consciously, just completely. I knew he did his serious studying at Hodges Library on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and was back in the room between 11:15 and 11:40 at the latest. I knew he made a cup of instant coffee when he got back, because he said the cold walk from the library reset his ability to sleep, and the coffee helped him wind back down. I knew the sound of his key in the lock, a slight resistance before it turned, because the lock cylinder was worn and he had put in 3 maintenance requests that had not been addressed. I knew the specific way he hung his backpack on the hook by the door, always 2 attempts, because the strap was too long for the hook height and he had never adjusted it. He had mentioned it to me twice and done nothing about it both times. I want you to have all of that before I continue. It was the second Tuesday of October. I had a lab report due Thursday, and I had been at my desk since around 8 in the evening. The room was quiet. Our building was on the east side of campus, 3rd floor, and Tuesday nights in that hall tended to run quiet after 10 because most of the students in that wing had early Wednesday classes. I had my headphones on, but nothing playing. I was using them to block ambient hall noise. I could hear everything in the room clearly. At approximately 5 minutes before midnight, I heard the key in the lock. I heard the resistance in the turn. I heard the door open. I heard the backpack hit the hook, fail to catch, and catch on the second try. I took my headphones off and turned my chair about 30 degrees toward the entryway. He came through the door and pushed it closed behind him and started working his jacket off his shoulders. I said, "Hey," and asked if Hodges had been crowded. He said not too bad. He said he had gotten most of his reading done. His voice was right. His jacket was his, the same dark blue fleece he had worn since Lee's sophomore year. His backpack was the same gray and black one, with a small rip at the lower left corner from when he caught it on a chain-link fence near the intramural fields. Everything was correct. He hung the jacket up and went to his desk and opened his laptop. I went back to my report. About 10 minutes in, I reached back to grab my water bottle off the shelf above my desk and knocked a pen off the edge. It rolled across the floor and stopped near the leg of his chair. I said sorry and stood up and crossed to pick it up. I crouched down next to his chair to grab it off the floor. From that low angle, I could see his laptop screen. The screen was on. He was not typing and not scrolling. He was sitting at the desk looking at the wall directly in front of him, not at the screen, at the painted cinder block between his desk and the window. His hands were in his lap. He was completely still, eyes forward, looking at nothing. I grabbed the pen and stood up. I looked at him directly. He did not react to me standing up beside him. I said, "Hey," asked if he was okay. He turned his head toward me, not quickly. The rotation was slow and even, covering about 60 degrees of movement, and it stopped with his eyes on me. He said yes. He said he was just tired. I went back to my desk. Something was sitting wrong in my chest. I could not name it yet. I opened my phone and sent him a text. We had a habit of texting across the room when one of us had headphones on. I asked him what chapter he was on for the ecology midterm. I watched his desk from my peripheral vision. His phone was face down. He did not pick it up. His hand stayed in his lap. The reply came in 30 seconds. It said he was on chapter 9. I looked at his phone on the desk. It had not moved. I went through explanation I could reach. Screen preview auto response was not something either of phones did. I had never set up any kind of auto reply feature, and he had mentioned once that he found them impersonal and never used them. I thought about whether a second device was logged into his account. Technically possible, but the chapter 9 answer was specific and correct and immediate. That required real-time awareness of the conversation. I thought about whether I had blinked and missed him picking up the phone faster than I tracked. I'd been watching his side of the room when the 3 dots appeared. His hands had not moved. I tried a different question. I asked in a follow-up text where we had eaten lunch the previous Thursday. I sent it and watched. The reply came back in under 20 seconds. It said he did not remember exactly, probably the university center. We had not eaten lunch together in almost 3 weeks. Our Thursday schedules had not overlapped since late September. He would have known that, and the phone on his desk had not moved. I stood up. I said I needed a break and was going to hit the vending machine down the hall. I picked up my room key and my phone and I walked out into the hallway and let the door close behind me. I walked to the far end of the hall past the RE office and I stood near the stairwell exit and I called his cell directly. It rang 4 times. He picked up in a groggy voice. He said he had gotten back from the library early around 10 because of a headache. He said he had been in bed since 10:15 and had been asleep for close to an hour. He sounded exactly like himself in a way that the thing sitting at the desk in our room did not. I told him I was in the hallway. I told him I had been in the room with someone for the past 20 minutes. He said, with who? I told him I was going to get the RA and I would explain when he came upstairs. I knocked on the RA's door and got him to walk back to the room with me. When we went in, the room was empty. Both beds were undisturbed. His desk was clean, laptop closed. The backpack was on the hook by the door. The jacket was also on the hook, except it was not on the hook. The jacket was on the floor in the center of the room, face down, arms fully extended, straight out to both sides. It was laid out with the kind of deliberate evenness you would have to apply intentionally, like someone had placed it in the shape of a body lying face down and making sure the arms were straight before they left. He came upstairs about 15 minutes later. He had been in a study group 1 floor below us, and 3 other students confirmed he had been with them from 7 until 10 p.m. He had come up, gone directly to bed, and had not been to the library that night at all. We stood in the room and looked at the jacket on the floor. He picked it up. On the back panel, between the shoulder blades, there were 3 parallel indentations pressed deep into the fleece. Not tears, not stains. Compression marks, like 3 fingers, had gripped the fabric from behind and held with significant force for a sustained period. The marks were structural enough that they did not release in the wash. He still has the jacket. It is in a box at his parents' house in Nashville. He told me he cannot wear it, but he cannot throw it away either. I told him I understood. We requested a room transfer and were in separate rooms by the start of 2nd semester. Nobody on our floor knew the real reason. We told the housing office it was a scheduling conflict. It was not a scheduling conflict. I do a long road trip every summer, not short hops, wheel distance driving. I have done I-40 across New Mexico and through the Arizona high desert twice before this trip, once going west out of Amarillo toward Flagstaff and once coming back east. I know what that stretch of interstate looks and sounds and smells like at different times of day and night. I know the specific quality of darkness that the New Mexico desert produces at 2 in the morning when there is no town glow on any horizon and your headlights are the only man-made light in any direction you can see. I know how a rest stop on I-40 between Santa Rosa and Albuquerque feels at 11 at night when the lot is empty and the overhead sodium arc lights put out that washed out orange-yellow color that makes the concrete look older than it is. I know that road. That is the foundation I need you to have before I tell you what happened on it in June of last year. I was making the drive with a close friend. We had known each other for 6 years, starting as college roommates and staying close through 2 different cities and 1 cross-country move. We had done road trips together before. She was one of those people who made long drives genuinely easy. She did not complain about music choices. She handled navigation without narrating every decision. She took her driving shifts without being asked. 6 years of friendship and multiple long drives meant I had a specific and detailed understanding of exactly how she moved through a trip. Her habits, her rest stop routine, the way she went quiet in the passenger seat and crossed her arms and tilted her head to the right at about 20 degrees when she fell asleep. The way she always checked her phone one more time before she put it in her jacket pocket. I knew all of it the same way. I know the controls of my own car. We left Amarillo heading west on I-40 around 7 in the evening. The plan was Albuquerque by 11. A motel, food, sleep, clean and simple. She drove the first leg out of Amarillo. I slept in the passenger seat for about 90 minutes, which is my usual first leg routine on a long drive. When I woke up, we were well into New Mexico and she had found a late-night talk radio program, and the cab smelled like the gas station coffee we had picked up before we left the Texas Panhandle behind. I took over the wheel near Tucumcari around 9:30. She pushed her seat back and pulled her olive green jacket over herself as a blanket and said she was going to sleep for an hour. I settled in. The road was nearly empty. The sky was completely clear, and the stars above the high desert were dense and bright in a way that city driving never lets you see. Mile markers came at me in the headlights at a steady rhythm. The heater in my car was running low because the night air off the desert floor was cold even in June. Around 10:40, I saw the rest stop sign. I was not fatigued, but I needed to use the bathroom, and I wanted to get out and move for 5 minutes. I pulled off I-40 and drove into the lot, empty. No other cars, just the low, flat restroom building, the covered picnic area, the lit vending machines at the far end, and those sodium arc lights overhead, casting everything in that flat orange color. The wind was moving through the sheet metal roof panels of the covered area and producing a low, steady sound that was almost like white noise. The motion of pulling in woke her. She asked where we were. I told her the rest stop outside of Santa Rosa. She said she would come in too. We both got out. The air outside smelled like asphalt and dry scrub, and something faintly sweet from whatever desert plant blooms in that region in June. I left the engine running and the headlights on. We walked to the restroom building together. She went in. I followed about 30 seconds behind her. I was done quickly, maybe 2 minutes. I came out into the covered walkway and walked back toward the car. I stopped at the vending machine near the end of the building and looked at my options. I was deciding between water and an electrolyte drink. I stood there for about 90 seconds. She came out of the restroom end of the building and walked toward me down the covered walkway. I could see her clearly. Her jacket was on and unzipped. She came up beside me and looked at the machine and asked what I was getting. I told her I was deciding. She pointed at the sports drink. I pressed the button and pulled it from the slot. We walked back to my car together. I got in on the driver's side. She walked around the front of the car to the passenger side and got in. I put it in reverse, backed out of the space, drove to the on-ramp, and merged onto I-40 westbound. 4 minutes after leaving the lot, my phone buzzed in the dashboard mount. The screen showed her name, her contact, her number, an incoming call. I looked at the passenger seat. She was sitting with her hands in her lap, looking straight ahead through the windshield. Her phone was in her jacket pocket. I could see the rectangular outline of it in the fabric. It had not come out. The call kept ringing. Her name on the screen. I answered it on speaker. Her voice came out of the phone. She said my name. She said she had come out of the restroom, and the car was gone. She said she had been standing in the rest stop lot for over 15 minutes. She said she had found a trucker who had just pulled in and asked to borrow his phone. Her voice through the speaker was different from the voice in the passenger seat. Warmer, more detailed. The voice in the seat had produced grammatically correct sentences in a flat, evenly spaced delivery. The voice from the phone had inflection and irregular rhythm and small breaths between words. It sounded like a person. I looked at the passenger seat. It was looking straight ahead. I said into the phone, "Are you at the rest stop right now?" She said yes. She said she was standing in the parking lot. She said the sign at the entrance said Santa Rosa. The dash display showed we were 4.5 miles west of that exit. I pressed the accelerator hard. I watched the speedometer move up, and I took the next available turnaround point, a maintenance access break in the median, and I swung the car east. The thing in the passenger seat did not move during the turn. My car shifted and swayed through the sharp cutback, and it sat with both hands in its lap and looked through the windshield as if nothing had changed. No grab for the door handle, no shift of body weight against the force of the turn. Perfect stillness through a maneuver that would move any passenger involuntarily. I told her through the phone to stay with the trucker. I said, "Do not go anywhere alone. I am coming back." I drove east at a speed I should not have been doing on a dark interstate. The exit ramp came up in under 5 minutes. I pulled into the rest stop lot, and my headlights swept across the far end near the vending machines. She was there, standing next to the cab of the semi, with a heavy-set man in a red cap beside her, real and present. I could see her face in my headlights, and it was her face, moving and responsive and lit from behind by the sodium arc lights. I pulled up and said, "Get in." She got in the back seat. I did not stop. I was back on the ramp before she got the door fully closed. She asked me, her voice behind me and coming from the back seat now and not the phone, what had happened and why I had driven away and left her at the rest stop. I looked in the rearview mirror at the back seat. She was there. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. I had not stopped the car since the moment she got in the back. I had not felt the passenger door open. I had not heard a door handle. The door was still closed. The lock on my door panel showed all 4 doors locked. The seat was empty. I pulled onto the shoulder about a mile out and sat there for a few minutes with the hazards on. Semis went past at highway speed and the car rocked slightly in their wake each time. She was in the back seat asking me to tell her what was happening. I turned the overhead dome light on. I checked the front passenger area completely. Empty. Floor. Empty. I turned around and checked the back seat. Just her. I told her everything. I turned around and checked the back seat. Just her. I told her everything. From the moment I had walked back from the restroom until the phone rang, she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me to describe exactly what it had been wearing. I told her. The olive green jacket. Unzipped. Her jacket. She told me to look at the back seat next to her. The jacket. She told me to look at the back seat next to her. The jacket was folded on the back seat beside her. She said she had been warm during the first driving leg and had taken it off before we stopped. She said she had left it folded on the back seat when she went into the restroom. She had gone in without it. Whatever got into the passenger side of my car at that rest stop had her jacket on. It had her voice close enough to use at the vending machine. It had her height and her coloring and her general shape. It had copied everything observable from outside the car. It had just not known about the jacket because the jacket decision was made inside the car before she got out, in a moment it had not been present for. That one private detail was the only margin between what happened and what could have happened. We did not stop again until Albuquerque. We checked into a motel on Central Avenue, turned every light on, and sat on top of the bedspreads without sleeping for most of what was left of the night. In the morning I checked the passenger seat in full daylight before we loaded the car. On the headrest there were 2 faint impressions pressed into the fabric, not from a head leaning back. The marks were too far forward on the headrest surface, and the depth pattern was wrong for resting pressure. They looked like something had pressed its face into the headrest from the front, with the full weight of its face pushing forward rather than back. The shape did not match any pressure pattern a human head would make in normal use. I had the seat cleaned at a detail shop in Albuquerque before we drove the rest of the way home. The marks did not come out. They are still there. Every time I get in the car and glance to my right, I can see them in the right light. 2 impressions in the headrest fabric from something that sat in that seat for 4.5 miles and looked straight ahead a dark desert highway and did not move even once. I have driven I-41 times since then. I did not stop between Amarillo and Albuquerque, not once. I drove 4.5 hours straight without pulling over because the answer to what waits at an empty rest stop at 11 o'clock at night on a dark stretch of New Mexico interstate is not a question I'm willing to test again.